for the fiber artist market. I'm Colette D. Phelps, and I'm going to be moderating the webinar today along with our colleague Amanda Snyder, and she is going to be running the chat and providing some information for you there. And we'll go over a few of the logistics before I introduce today's presenter, Kate Painter. So webinar tips. If you close all the other programs running on your computer, your bandwidth will be designated to watching this webinar, which might be a little bit better in terms of video speed and sound. If you are having trouble with your sound, go ahead and call in on the number provided in the welcome email with the link to this webinar. And if you do that, please mute your computer so that you don't get feedback when you're using the phone. You can type questions for speakers into the question box at any time throughout the webinar. We do have a couple of times where we're going to pause and answer those questions. If you're having any technology troubles, Amanda is standing by to help you with those as well. Amanda has also put into the chat a link where you can find a copy of today's slides and a resource handout that Kate has prepared. So we have a few polls that we want to run to start the webinar. If this is your first webinar with us, these polls are really like survey questions that you can answer with your mouse. And so our first question today is asking about who's in the audience. And so we're asking if you're a farmer, rancher, student, educator, researcher, perhaps working for another organization, a future farmer. To vote, all you need to do is to click on the box or boxes that are most representative of your role. On my side, I can see the voting as it happens, so I can see that almost half of our participants have voted. And then after you've completed this first question, there's a second question that's just asking how old you are. It's giving us a better idea of who's on today. So 70% of our participants have voted, 80%. Give it a couple more seconds before I end the poll and show you the results. I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results. And as you can see, most of the folks on today's webinar are farmers and ranchers. We have a couple other folks, including a future farmer. And our age range is between 40 and 69 for today's participants. Great. We have a second poll. We'd like to know where you're located. Are you in Idaho, and if so, in what region? Perhaps Washington or Oregon, or outside of the Pacific Northwest? Almost everyone has participated in the poll. Great. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we can see that our participants, we have a lot of people up in North Idaho, several in Washington, and then also some tuning in today from Southwest Idaho and Central Idaho. Thank you for that. Now this is our last poll, and this is going to help us understand if you're already raising animals for fiber, what you're raising, or if you're looking to raise animals for fiber in the future. So if you're raising sheep, goats, rabbits, alpacas, or another animal for fiber, let us know. Or if you're looking at future, it's our first question in this poll. And then the second question, it just has a few statements that we're wondering if they're true for you. If you use fiber from your animals for your own spinning, felting, or other fiber arts projects, if you're already selling fiber to fiber artists, if you're a fiber artist that does not currently own fiber producing animals, or if you're a farmer that's interested in producing fiber producing animals. Great. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like those that are producing today are raising sheep. And we have some folks that are also looking to raise fiber animals in the future. And quite a few of our participants are using their fiber in their own projects and have started selling to fiber artists. And again, we have a couple people that are not owning their own animals, but are interested in doing that in the future, interested in producing fiber from a farmer. So with that, thank you so much. It's a good orientation, Kate. And so I'm going to hand the webinar over to Kate Painter. Kate is an extension educator up in Boundary County, and she has a lot of personal experience with both raising sheep and doing online marketing of fiber. So she's an expert in many ways, and welcome. Thank you for doing today's webinar, Kate.
Hi, everybody. This is my favorite topic, so I am very happy to be here as well, and I hope I can be helpful. Thank you for filling out questions, because that helps me know who's in the audience. I raised fiber producing sheep for about 25 years, and of course I had too much fleece on my hands and needed to market it. So I started, I remember going to my first fiber show, and everybody had all these beautiful boots, and I was hauling up these dirty old fleeces in plastic bags and plopped them down around my table and wondered why they didn't sell. So you just have to start learning, and I am a spinner. That's really, I'm passionate about fiber arts, and learned to knit really early on and wanted to have nice wool that didn't cost a small fortune, so got interested in spinning. So I hope I can be really helpful today with what I've learned, and but please do feel free to ask questions in the chat if you've got anything you want to ask. There's plenty of time for that. So making money with wool is not an easy process. You cannot be impatient. You have to learn about the market and what you have to do, and your customers, and you will have to slowly build up your reputation. Research the market and your competition, find out what others are doing, and learn as much as you can about your market. What breeds are popular? Do people like white? Do they like colored? Should you value add by dyeing it or something? You know, what do they want? Do they want soft wool? Do they want wool for making rugs? And the beauty of today's marketing is you can reach all these different niche markets. So you don't need to feel confined by your local market. There may be a perfect market for you that you can do from where you are. I know that being in Eastern Washington, where I raised my sheep, where it was quite dry, I could successfully cover my fleeces, which is the key. We'll talk about that, and raise a fine wool sheep and sell it on the coast in the Seattle and Portland large markets with lots of hand spinners, and where it was hard for them to grow the fine market, the fine wool fleeces. So it's important to have good fiber animals, not just anything, and think, oh, I should be able to sell some of this wool off of my sheep. It is useful, but there are breeds that are specifically been developed and refined forever to be for a specific purpose, like this Cormo in this picture here. You can see the beautiful crimp, incredibly clean fleece. This is very difficult to achieve. Very long, so all these qualities that just make hand spinners drool. If you are able to come up with products like this, you will have no trouble selling them, because this is hard to do. So here's some keys. It's worth it to invest in good breeding stock that has been developed and refined and chosen for having these beautiful qualities. Healthy sheep is critical to having good fleece. Young sheep, the older you get, the worse your hair is. We all know that. So it is sad that sheep's wool does deteriorate over time, just like ours does, just from age. Really, really key, though, is a lot of things that you have control over. That isn't just something that you have to feel like you have to buy or spend a lot of money for, and that is good management. So shearing before you lamb or right around lambing time is important, because that's a big, huge stressor for your sheep, and stressing causes a weakness in your lock. And I am going to try to show you. I don't know if you've seen anybody do this. Take a lock of wool. I'm doing this in my little headshot here, and you kind of snap it. The chip sounds kind of pings, but if it sounds like crackle pop, like all those hairs are breaking, I mean, surely you can pull hard enough to make it break, but it shouldn't break or have. This doesn't have any breaking noise at all. But if and sometimes that's happened. I'll find a fleece that I think is really beautiful, and I'm like, oh no, this fleece has a break in it. This sheep, unbeknownst to me, got sick and has a weakness right in the middle of those locks. It's garbage. It's going to go into a different pile. I can't sell it to hand spinners. So we do try to have any kind of stressor be at the end of the beginning, where you shear. And so the other beauty of having lambing is after you shear is that your fleeces don't get soiled, and those poor little lambs don't have to fight through all the dirty wool to find the udders. Okay, so other points, you do want the length and the softness of your fleece to be breed appropriate. I know I struggled for quite a while because my beautiful colored Rambouillet ram his fleece was short, a little bit short, and then I had all that in my offspring, and then when I found out, when I had it tested for microns, it wasn't as fine as I thought it should be, and I realized the folly of getting a ram that was convenient in terms of I could buy it, drive locally, versus arranging to have one shipped that was super high quality from California. That was totally worth it as an expense. It's hard to make those leaps sometimes, but just thinking about your breeding stock, if your ram, it's going to influence all your offspring. And then the final bullet point here, clean fiber, even if raw. Beautifully clean fiber is hard to find. So you think, what can I do to distinguish myself in the marketplace? Really, really strive to have clean fiber is probably the best thing you can do. It's really a hard task. So here's some different wool breeds, and you can see how very different they look, and yet all of these are sought after. If somebody wants a merino fleece, they're very, very soft. You've had merino wool things, no doubt. Very soft. It's a very fine fiber. The one on the right, Blueface Leicester, is long and lustrous, easier to spin, not quite as soft, but lovely. Icelandic on the far left is even more different. So if somebody wants a soft fleece and you try to market them an Icelandic fleece thing, well, it's pretty soft. They're going to be disappointed. So it's good to have a good representative of your breed. So when you're selling that breed, people are getting what they expect. And a real nice way to see how you stack up is to try to go to fiber shows or fairs and submit entries with your fleece. So quality considerations. Dirt washes out well. Soil, but vegetable matter like feed is very, very difficult to remove. So I have a little lock here, and it's got just a little bit of grain in it. That's not too bad, but so much is often got so much alfalfa and grain, and that if you're a hand spinner and you're having to constantly stop and pick these things out, is very irritating. They don't fall out when you wash them. The wool is very good at hanging on to bits of chaff and grain. So what you have to do is you have to either cover your fleeces and or remove those areas of the fleece that are contaminated, and don't try to sell those. So I already talked about no breaks in the fiber. Wool is very prone to matting or felting. It's very good at doing that. So if you have areas of the fleece or even an entire fleece that's matted or felted, then don't try to sell that. Second cuts, these are these little tiny pieces that were accidentally recut. So the shear goes over the skin and then he goes over it again, and there might be a little area where it's cut twice. And so you've got these little tiny things that you don't want in your yarn because they're going to just pull out, right? They're not good. And it is a natural process that you're going to have second cuts. It's not like it's a bad shear that leaves second cuts. It's, you need to roll those off the fleece, off the cut surface before you try to sell it. And where I say no matting or felting, that is another thing that you can influence by how you store your fleeces. When they come off the animals, they're kind of wet, and you need to let them, be completely devoid of moisture and then store them correctly. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Are there any questions?
There aren't any questions yet, Kate.
Okay, so feel free to chat. Put a question in the chat box. So my advice here is, when in doubt, throw it out. And you don't necessarily have to throw it out, like in the compost or in the dump. I would have several different sorting boxes. So you're trying to make this beautiful fleece, and in my experience, you make the most money from selling that intact wool fleece to a hand spinner who's going to put in all the time, all the labor, and the value added themselves. It's very hard to get someone else to pay for that from a small producer's custom kind of standpoint. So you could put your stuff that's not maybe perfect to be with the fleece into another box that you might wash and card into roving or sell as at a different price or use for another purpose like stuffing. So you want to maintain your reputation for quality fleeces, and that will allow you to keep selling at premium prices. It's really a different world these days that you can leave comments on a website, and you don't want anyone leaving a bad comment, or if they do, just try to address it. But stuff happens. I had so many fleeces. I had over 100 fleeces in my barn that built up, and I kept trying to market them. And when I went back to work full time after I sold Paradise Fibers, and had a hard time getting my fleeces marketed, I kept my sheep. And so sometimes you get moths in your boxes and you don't know it, and it looks fine. Somebody gets it, they open it up, and there are moths. And so you just lean over backwards, apologize, refund them all their money, and that's all you can do. So you don't make yourself into a basket case about I have to be perfect, but it's just amazing how far your reputation will take itself if you try to do a really good job and be kind and empathetic. So you just guarantee your customer satisfaction. And then, as I said, you can sell or use second quality fleece for other purposes. I'd like to also kind of do things with the school, and then I could donate some of it. There's all kinds of ways. People like to use it for dog beds, for example. I think a lot of you are sheep producers, so you're well aware of the fact that wool pool prices hardly cover your shearing costs. I think that's why we've seen a lot of people going to hair sheep, so they don't have to do the shearing. You pay anywhere from $3 to $6 per head to shear. You pay more for ram. It's about a double. And the fleeces really vary, but they usually weigh 5 or 10 pounds. And the wool pool prices have been low for a long time, around 50 cents a pound. So you can do the math there. It's hardly a break-even proposition, and it's a lot of work. I have seen some crazy high prices for hand spinning fleeces. I don't think very many sell at $180 for 4.5 pounds, like the one in this picture here. It says 4.12 pounds, $180 for the whole fleece. So it's not even 4.5, it's 4.12, or $90 for half of the fleece. 3.5 inches long isn't terribly long for a cornrow fleece. And while it looks really clean, it does have it's not as perfect as the one in the previous one. It looks really, really good. But still, we're going to do some math just to emphasize my point of it costs a lot to take a raw fleece to the point of yarn, and it's very hard to recoup that money in terms of reselling it. I think good fleece is typically in the neighborhood of $10 to $25 a pound. It'd be more realistic to aim for something. However, covered fleeces sell quickly and for a premium. It is a lot of work to keep your sheep in covered fleeces, but even if you can keep some of your very best that way, it'll pay for itself. And another trick that you see is sometimes people only sell the very best part of a fleece, and they can get higher prices for small amounts. So it'll all maybe all balance out better for them if they can at least sell the premium parts of the fleece. Like this example, this was in the Etsy store, ultrafine merino fleece, 100 grams. That's only about 3.5 ounces, but it's very fine, less than 16 micron raw fleece, white merino, $5.90. So that's one way to just try marketing a little bit. And actually, it will take whoever buys this a long time to process that because it's very fine. And it might just be right for them. Okay, just talking for a moment about coats for your sheep. I've spent a lot of time researching this, and I've tried making them as well. I really feel that this Rocky Sheep company has an excellent product, and I have not seen another company that's in the US that does as good a job. They use 1000 denier woven nylon, and the prices are between $19 to $28 depending on the size. They have very heavy strapping to go around the legs. It reduces the sun damage as well as contamination from feed and bedding. So the fleeces have really nice ends. They're not sun bleached and they're not broken down. So once fiber artists get covered fleeces, it's hard to sell uncovered fleeces to them. But some of the management issues are that sheep will rub up against barbed wire, they'll flail and sometimes get them caught on something, so you've got to watch them, and they may outgrow theirs. You may have to change it once or twice. Might be too big at the beginning of the year, too small at the end of the year, stuff like that. So here's a picture of my flock. They're not all covered. It's hard to cover ones that are growing very fast. And then I also had some lesser quality ones I didn't worry about. But I just felt like it was putting windbreakers on my sheep, that they did a lot better. It's very cold and they've got another layer of protection. Another thing that was odd is it seemed coyotes were less interested in the ones with covers. I never lost a covered sheep to a coyote. Okay, were there any questions?
We do have one question, Kate, and this comes from Amner, and he asks, I have a ram that has an odor to his fleece. What would be the reason for this, and is there something that can be done?
Oh, that's a good question. I really feel like ram fleeces are stinky. I just think that's kind of the nature of the rams. It does wash out. I guess you could identify it as such and just say, this is my ram fleece. It has a bit of an odor. When I bought the really nice Cormo colored ram out of California, that was such a premium fleece, I had no problem selling it. And I just had to say, this is a ram fleece, so it'll have a odor that ram fleeces typically have if you're going to sell it as a raw fleece. Okay, so I want to talk about skirting fleeces. There's a traditional way of doing this, and people will expect this. Basically, you're skirting, you're going around the edges. You can see this diagram, and I also have a YouTube link. I am not going to play this, but this was the best example I could find online of somebody showing you the process where and we'll talk about it a little bit too, as we have some more pictures. But basically, you're going to go around the outside edges, and you can imagine that around where they're eating, there's the neck. It's going to be dirty. You're going to have a lot of shorter fibers along the legs. You're going to have some sweat points that are like under their arms, under their legs. And those are really, that wool is really stuck together and dirty. You're going to also, if they're not wearing a coat, you're going to have an area all down the center of the back that says dusty and tender back, depending on the fleece. Sometimes they have a slicky neck. So you're going to basically, you go all the way around the edges, and a lot of that's just going to be manure, and you're just going to want to toss that, compost it or whatever. And you may have some areas that are okay, maybe for a second purpose, and maybe you'd have a second quality box to put those in. And you have the fleece at this point is the cut side is down. That's how you start. And you hopefully have somebody after it's shorn that's all in one piece, and they can fling it out, and it'll look sort of like that. You might have to straighten it out a little bit to try to get it back into this shape of the animal so that you are skirting the edges. And then you fold in the two sides towards the middle. So the one side from the top of this image down, and the side from the bottom of the image down. So the leg sides are folded towards the middle, and you run your hands along that cut edge, and you try to remove all your second cuts, which will be little balls, kind of ball up these little short things. I had one identified here, and they just tend to be right along the cut edge, and you can just roll them off with your hands, get rid of those that are not any good. Okay, they used to do that, fold the two sides in, and then roll it from the tail up to the head, and then tie it. But now we don't see them tied anymore. You would just either put that in an open plastic bag. That's usually how I started, and then later on put them in a cardboard box. So yeah, you use a table. I would just use a piece of heavy wire. You'll see it in a minute. Heavy expanded metal, like a 4x8 piece. People do a lot fancier, but just something so that the dirt can fall. You remove the belly wool. Hopefully that's removed by the shearer, and the leg wool, that it just doesn't even come to the skirting table. You can see in this image there's the breech wool. It looks very different from the crimpy wool on the right. You don't want that breech wool. It feels more like horsehair, and it's not, doesn't have the crimp. So you don't want the non-uniform stuff in there. Some fleece breeds are more non-uniform, just in the nature of them, but you want it to be as uniform as possible. Okay, and so you're removing the greasy tags along the rear and the sides near the sweat glands. You're removing vegetable matter, VM is what they call it, any manure or soiled areas, and knowing that some things will wash out, but you should be able to tell if it's just like a urine stain that can wash out. Still, just imagine the fact that somebody's opening in a box in their apartment and they have sheep poop fall out. It doesn't make a good impression. So here we are at my farm, a very crude thing with a piece of duct tape along a piece of expanded metal on some barrels. And we've got a number of people because this takes a long time to do a good job. So I tried to make a big celebration with a big meal and a lot of fun happening on shearing day, and to get all my friends to come help with this process. You can see how greasy their hands are. Got lots of boxes and garbage bags for sorting. Here's on to a not so happy topic, and sorry for the gross photo, but this is what moth damage looks like. And you really want to avoid that. One of the first problems to worry about is you don't want to have your wool felt. So if you've got a whole bunch of plastic bags and you stack them on top of each other, you're going to have the bottom ones especially be felted. So Plastic bags are really handy, but they're really not that great for storing fleeces as they can retain moisture and cause felting. What I really like to do is to buy a whole bunch of boxes from Uline that were big enough for compressing it. And then I would put it on bottle, label it, and stack them way up high in my hip barn. Moths, though, are such a destructive pest, and mothballs are pretty toxic. So what do? This is a quandary. Herbal approaches are somewhat effective, but I think you just have to keep inspecting, because sadly, I hadn't had problems with moths in my stored fleeces because the winters were so cold, and I think we just didn't have them. And then we started to have them, and I realized they would go from one box to the next, to the next, to the next. So I had an entire column of beautiful fleeces that had moth damage, and really there was nothing to do except for toss it. If it was my own precious thing, maybe I would remove part of it and freeze the rest of it to kill the eggs and deal with it. But you can't take the chance of selling fleece that has had moth damage in it. And if you're buying things and you don't want it to get damaged, then of course you wash it, because dirt and grease are what attracts the moths. I guess one of my biggest lessons I learned was adding any kind of value, which costs money, was very, very hard to recoup when you went to sell it. Some things you could, but in terms of going from a raw fleece to anything else, it was extremely hard to make it pay. Hardly anything paid as well as, in fact, I think I could say nothing paid as well as selling raw fleece that was, good quality, high quality hand spinning fleece. And that market is not that large because good. So anything you do, washing the fleece, dyeing it, having it carded, making it into anything else, because they're done on slow, small quantities. You don't have economies of scale, and it's all done by custom mills, and they have to make their money, and it all becomes quite expensive. So I was going to do a little bit of the math on that. I really like Spinderella's creations. I've shopped around at all the different mills I could find, and she's very reasonable and does an excellent job. So her washing services are $4.50 a pound. That really adds up. And then, so that's based on the incoming weight. So if you sent her 10 pounds of wool, you're paying $45, and you only have about half of that wool left because they've just washed out half the weight. Custom carding, it's very, very, very time consuming to hand card. So this is always a tempting thing to have done. $6.75 a pound, and every time you do the process like that, you lose a little bit more weight. And if you wanted a carded bat, it's $9.50 a pound, and on and on. If you wanted wool to be spun into yarn, it's usually about $18 to $24 a pound after you've had it washed. So it adds up quickly. And besides just having somebody else do it for you at a mill, which seems like a good idea, you've got to ship it. I would usually wash my own fleece to save money and shipping weight. In the summertime when it's really hot, it's not that hard to do. But you can also have it carded and spun into yarn. I had yarn, I had like an entire bale of fleeces made into yarn at one point. And I'm glad I did it. It's just been taking me literally years to get the money back from that wool. I just had so much wool, and I wanted to have it be clean and in a marketable form. Every step in the way, though, costs more money. Additional plies, 4-ounce skeins, rewinding, anything like that. And by the time you've done all that, it's very hard to have any kind of wholesale margin, so you end up selling it directly, which is easier today than in the past in many ways. It's kind of hard though. So you've got your local beautiful fiber in your fiber shed, and you're hoping that people will be happy to support you. However, you're competing against prices they see online. $17 a pound for beautiful merino wool, washed, carded, absolutely clean, done by the mill at a mill, and the retail price is $17 a pound. There's no way you could ever compete with that. Let's look at the math for a minute. You're going to have 40 to 60%, let's say half, of the loss of weight from washing because of the grease in the wool and the dirt. It'll only weigh half as much when you're done washing. And believe me, washing a sheep wool, I'm sure some of you have done this, it's very greasy and it takes a lot of soap, and you have to be very careful you don't felt it. And then every time you do one more step like carding or pin drafting or spinning into yarn, you're going to lose weight. There's just going to be stuff left in the machinery or fallen out. So let's just do a little tiny bit of math here. 100 pounds of raw wool, you're going to have 40 to 60 pounds of clean wool left after, let's say 50. And you're going to have it made into roving. That's 45 pounds of roving from 100 pounds of raw wool. So 10 pounds of raw wool is 4.5 pounds. I'm doing my example on. Okay. 10 pounds of wool at $10 a pound. You're buying it from a nice hand spinning place for $100. But you're just getting 4.5 pounds of roving. So if you take $100 by 4.5, you've paid $22 a pound. Just in terms of you've lost a bunch of weight due to dirt. But you've also had to pay to have this done if you're having Spinderella's Creations doing it. $45, excuse me, at $4.50 a pound. And then $30 for carding because it's $6.75 per pound for the finished weight. So that's another $17 per pound because you've got $75 divided by 4.5 pounds. $45 for the scouring and $30 for the carding. So you paid Spinderella's Creations $75, and you're getting just 4.5 pounds of roving. So that total cost is $39 per pound. That's a lot more than that $17 you saw in the first slide. And if you had it spun into yarn after that, well, you wouldn't do it quite that way. You'd just have it scoured, and then you'd spend $18 to $24 per pound. But if you think of those 4-ounce skeins that you saw on the previous slide, that's a quarter of a pound. And I was selling those for $12 for 4 ounces. There's not a lot of room for doing any kind of wholesale, unless hopefully you're getting that entire amount for retail. I tried to make it so that it would be equivalent to selling raw fleeces when I sold my yarn. But you know, you've got shipping to the mill, shipping back. And so you can see why I would wash it myself to save that shipping weight and that expense. But the best thing is to let somebody else take that joy of washing and carding and spinning it by hand, and that you don't have that money sunk into something and have a hard time selling it for what you have into it. And we have such a wonderful opportunity now of selling online, and people are, you know, shipping is costly, especially for something like a raw fleece, but it's expected. And people have an easier time, I think, you know, paying for shipping and realizing that the convenience is wonderful. The other thing that works really well, and this surprised me so much when I started. At first, I had my fleeces, and I just had a little mail order company. And being kind of a computer geek, I thought, well, I'll put my business online and see what happens. And I take my little samples, and like the one in the bottom picture, and use a flatbed scanner and scan them and put them online. And lo and behold, it worked really well, which was really surprising to me because it's such a tactile thing, but it's such a niche market. So that does work really well. Where can you cannot find this locally, so you go online and look for it. And there's some really premium markets online. The Etsy marketplace has worked really well for me. And your own website is really nice if you have the time and energy to do that. I think that's probably the very best. Facebook has very specific content groups, and it can work quite well for people. One thing that really helped my business was going to craft sales that were very specific to the industry. Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival is the very biggest in the country. I don't know if you want to go to Maryland, but if you get an opportunity, it would be an education. Black Sheep Gathering is in Eugene, Oregon, and Oregon Flock and Fiber is near south of Portland. One's in the spring and one's in the fall. And we also have local fairs and events for fiber artists, like in Coeur d'Alene, there's Log Cabin Fiber Arts Festival on March 16th. More general craft fairs were never very successful for me. People would like to see me sitting there spinning and with all my wares, but they're not, it's just too specific. So these are pictures off of Etsy, and you know, people can sell small quantities for good amounts here, and so you can look and see if you see a lot of things on Etsy that you feel like you could do. You can try it. There's very little risk involved. It's 20 cents for a listing fee, and then they get 5% commission on what you sell. So it's a very popular site, and it's rated very highly by buyers and sellers. It has excellent tutorials, a seller's handbook, guides for taking photos, which is one of the hardest things to do. These are all very nice photos here. And the prices are quite good. Natural colored gray Romney, $30. I'm not sure if that's what that's for. There's another one on the far right, $30. I guess we'd have to look into it to see if that's per fleece or per pound, but it allows you to get to a very specific audience, which is key. You can have a whole storefront like this, Aspendale Farm. Look at that, the 5 stars. Very important that you be a really good seller in terms of doing what you said you're going to do and respond to emails. And everyone knows there's a few cranks out there on the internet, but for the most part, I have to say that fiber arts people aren't cranks. I never had one person stiff me in all the years I had Paradise Fibers, not ever. I'd find out someone hadn't paid, it was because they had passed away. So, or something, there was a reason. But anyway, it's great to have a community like this. You start to get repeat customers and they become friends. My storefront is called Sheep Symphony, and it's pretty much defunct. I don't work on it much, but I did sell $3,500 worth of leftover inventory there. Lots of fleeces. This is just I'm selling more of that same yarn. Samples for $3 with free shipping, and skeins for $12. There's a picture of Shelley Stone and a finished product from the yarn. Okay, going to move along here. I really liked this website. I think they're doing a fantastic job. I kind of almost wish I was in the business still, because they're so fun what some of these websites do. And it is much, much easier these days to put a website together. You don't have to know programming. There's a lot of good advice and tools, and easier to use software programs. So this has got all kinds of good information about their sheep farm. And you can buy their fleeces here. This one is reserved already, and it's $18 a pound for 6 to 7 pounds. And they do some value added, $2.25 per ounce. I kind of doubt that pays very well if you do the math like we did earlier. It is fun to have some things like that. But what I did, and I wonder if they did also, is I found big retail blocks of that stuff you saw retailing for $6 a pound. You can buy it wholesale in for much less than that, and then you play with it and do the dyeing on somebody else's. Another product you could have in your product line, because you can't compete with the economies of scale that a big factory has. Okay, this is a bad example in my opinion. See what you think. Facebook marketing example. Not very professional. I have been following her, and she does complain publicly about people complain about her prices. That also was a little odd. So she's making up this auction, and you got to do it within Facebook, get your bid in. And so this was first. She's auctioning these things off, and these are her rules. That was posted later. She didn't put the apostrophe in the IM. And you know, you just wonder how professional they are. Bidding starts at $50 a pound. Winner is buying the whole fleece. So how much is that? Is that 10 pounds? Shipping is not included. So anyway, play nice and good luck, fiber junkies. It seems a little tacky. So what I really love to do is to sell as much as possible. Make Sharing Day a great event for people to come out of curiosity, bring their kids, have lunch all together. And I spend a lot of time to make it really nice with fresh straw and cozy and good food. And we all had a lot of fun. People just do like to come out to the farm and see the critters. And you can use their help on Shearing Day, like my friends that help me skirt and hold the sheep and toss the fleeces. And if you can sell as much as possible that day, then you have less to deal with. Because I spent a ridiculous amount of time after shearing to make sure they were all perfect and to label them and scan them and put them in boxes and to market them. Okay, and if you're really interested in this, go to Fiber and Sheep festivals. They're a lot of fun, and you will get a lot of ideas, and you will see what other people are doing. You'll make some friends, maybe get some mentoring. The Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival, the average is $15 a pound, and the wool is absolutely wonderful. So if you're somebody who wants to buy it, it's not terrible to get such perfect fleeces for that price. You can see the same thing at our local festivals. Black Sheep Gathering is a lot of fun. It's in Eugene. And like I already said, Coeur d'Alene, March 16th on Saturday from 10 to 2. You might want to Google that. I believe it's at the fairgrounds this year. Another potential that is, I think, really, really good for our local farmers is that I was always amazed at how people would want to come to see my farm. They would go out of their way. People like to see it. It's fun. This one has a blog, Ask the Shepherd, your farm store, and you can just really feel that wonderful feeling of being on a farm and raising sheep and educating yourself. You've got a captive audience of people that are going to your blog. It's a great way to get customers. Look at all her nice social media that she's doing there. It takes a lot of time, but we had a webinar on online marketing 2 weeks ago that I did based on some of my experience. So, this is a shot a friend of mine took. She thought it was so cute that the lamb was lying on top of their mom. They love to do that because it's a cozy, warm spot. And this is actually was made into note cards, and then somebody asked if they could put this picture on there. So there's a book that's a sheep book that has this picture from my farm on it, which is fun. And if all else fails, you can use wool as mulch. It's a good weed barrier. It warms the soil, retains moisture. It's slow to decompose and feeds the soil. And it can blow around. That's a bad part, and it may attract pests. So there's a little bit of downside, but it is another use. Okay. Now we're at the question spot here.
So if you have questions, go ahead and type those into the question box at the bottom of your screen. We have one question, Kate, and this is about how you stored your fleeces. Did you store them all raw, not washed or processed?
Yeah, so I would try to sell as many raw fleece as possible, as soon as possible. But after the shearing day, I would go through and reskirt everything, make sure that nothing was missed in the kind of the rush of the day, and roll them and fold them, take samples, photograph them, and put them in these large boxes that were just under the size that's not oversized if you ship UPS. Then I'd mark them and stack them, and I like to tape all the edges, just keep moths out. And then I would stack them because I had so many up high, but because they were not, it wasn't felting because they were in boxes. And when I had Paradise Fibers and shearing day came along, I would sell, because I was marketing online and had a lot of people, I could sell them all really quickly. Like I'd definitely sell over half in the first 10 days. Because you just have that urgency if you want them into somebody else's care to get them washed. And you just don't like them sitting around unwashed. You want to keep them as cold as possible, but there's always that danger, and you do have to keep inspecting them for moths. I did use mothballs for a while, and years ago I used those 3M strips, those horrible yellow things. Those are effective, but I don't like using those things, and so I made my own mothballs using some essential oils and would use those. Just have to keep an eye on things, I guess.
Thank you, Kate. We have not had any other questions come in. That was a great webinar. And if we flip to the next slide, we can let people know. Just a reminder, if you go to the Cultivating Success website and click on the webinar series, you'll be able to find the handouts, both the slides and a resource list that Kate put together for you. Within a day or two, you will also be able to access a recording of this webinar. You can also register for other webinars or view the online marketing webinar that Kate did 2 weeks ago. That is already posted. Next slide, please. Here you see a list of our upcoming webinars. We will be adding more as we move into spring. Our next webinar, which is on March 5th, is about new enterprises for 2019, how to identify and evaluate your opportunities. And Ken Hart, who's in Lewis County, will be giving that webinar. Cultivating Success is a partnership of University of Idaho Extension, Washington State University's Food Systems Program, and the nonprofit Rural Roots.
I just want to say, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk about my favorite subject.
Great. And on this next slide, we'll see Kate's email as well as my own. And we would really appreciate your taking a couple minutes to take our post-webinar survey. Our webinar evaluations average to be about a 4-minute time period. So it's definitely a very quick evaluation, but you will have an opportunity to give some feedback on this webinar and then to let us know what else you want to know more about. With that, I want to thank you for joining today's webinar. We appreciate your time and we hope that you have a great rest of your day.